All right, last week, the last thing that we kind of jammed into this lecture was the observations and inferences that Charles Darwin had on his trip through the Galapagos Islands. And ultimately, these observations led to these guesses, these inferences, to explain how species changed over time. Okay, his basically his ideas about what he called natural selection. So we ran through all these. We talked about how organisms are going to want to reproduce as much as possible, but the environment doesn't allow for that. So there's a struggle for existence. That's kind of a big idea here, that within populations, there's a struggle for resources. Some animals are going to be better at getting those resources. And ultimately, when they do, ultimately, when they do get these resources, they're able to reproduce, okay? And the things that allow them to get these resources are these different inheritable traits. And some of these inheritable traits allow them to survive better, and so they get the chance to reproduce if they survive. And so this leads to the accumulation of characteristics in a population that happen to be beneficial to a particular environment. Now, with an example of inference number 3, or I should say, not an example, but yeah, I guess it's an example, an illustration of inference 3, the peppered moths. Okay, you guys have probably heard about the peppered moths. This is a thing that happened, I think, they studied these over in Europe somewhere, Great Britain maybe. And it was basically natural selection happening in a very short time frame. And the reason for it was because of the Industrial Revolution. So to give you some backstory here, those of you who can, I'm going to dim the lights in here because the pictures are easier to see, but at home, you guys can see pretty easily that on this picture on the right, there's a picture of kind of like a tree, it's tree bark, and this tree is covered in like whitish gray lichen. Okay, it's a type of mossy, fungusy type of thing. And it makes, for the most part, all the trees kind of whitish colored, okay? And a moth would be really, a moth that is dark colored would be really, really easy to see if it landed on that particular tree, right? So we can see a dark colored moth land on that tree and it stands out. So anything that wants to eat it says, hey, I'm here, look at me, I don't blend in, come eat me, okay? And so this guy, this dark colored moth that I've outlined in green, is going to have a much harder time surviving in this type of environment. I bet you didn't know that there is actually a white moth in this picture. Can you see it? On the picture on the right, there is actually a white moth here. And if you were a bird looking to eat it, you'd be like, you have no clue, right? I can't barely see it. And I know it's there. Let's see if I can outline it. Let's see if I can outline it in red. There it is. That's him right there. Okay. So that moth that I just outlined in red is completely camouflaged. You can't see it at all. And so this was the normal way of things until the Industrial Revolution, when you start having all this pollution and smog and stuff like that. And so during the Industrial Revolution, the environment changed, where these trees no longer looked white, they looked covered in soot. And so now, guess which ones stuck out? The ones that stick out are the white ones, okay? So if a bird sees those, they're going to get picked off and eaten real quickly. And in fact, there is a black moth on this picture as well, on the picture on the left. And he's right down here, but he's much harder to see, right? So we have a change in the environment, which Charles Darwin said was absolutely important to this natural selection, this evolution, that the environment does play a huge role in how organisms are going to survive. And in this case, the environment changes very, very quickly. And you have a shift in population because the environment changed and certain characteristics allowed some individuals to survive better. So during this change in the environment, all of a sudden, these guys are surviving better. The ones that are dark are surviving better. So if they get to survive to reproductive age better, then they get to pass their genes on to the next generation, and their genes are going to accumulate over a longer period of time. Okay, so all of a sudden we get a shift in what's called the allele frequency. We'll learn that in chapter 23. Okay, but we can change the population's characteristics in terms of their physical adaptations in a relatively short amount of time. It doesn't have to take millions and millions of years, but maybe if you want to change a dinosaur into a bird, that would take that long. But just changing the color of the dominant color of an individual in a population really doesn't take that long. Okay, so this thing actually I found one that works. We'll just go to the light forest here, and if you ever want to, you can play. You can be the bird, and you can eat all these things. And it usually has a really annoying sound. I'll try to eat all the ones I can find, and you can see the frequency of the individuals rise and fall over time. Oh, you're dead. This is so fun. There's a dead one. Get you. And there's probably a bunch of white ones that I don't even see. And even if there are white ones that you can see flying, as soon as a dark one comes into the picture, the bird, me, forgets about all the other ones and says, I'm eating that one because it's easy. I don't have to strain for it. I have to look for it. I could just go eat it right away. And so over, let's say 50 seconds, I just did that. I've taken the dark moth population and reduced it to 25% because they're easy to see, they're easy to eat. So the ones that are left over, the light moths, yeah, simulation complete. The ones that are left over, the light-colored moths, get to survive and get to reproduce. And so their offspring are going to be light-colored, more than likely, and they're going to pass their genes on to the next generation, so on and so forth. So the peppered moth is a really, really good simulation of what's actually happening, okay? I think this slide right here is going to be absolutely important for your understanding, and just an easy place to go to get the summarization of all natural selection. Okay, so maybe make note that this is something important that you should kind of keep your eyeball on, and maybe use it as a study tool later. But it puts into perspective everything we've talked about up until this point here. So the quote-unquote definition of natural selection is kind of the first thing we see there. Natural selection is differential success in reproduction from interaction between individuals that vary in heritable traits and their environment. That's like all of Darwin's observations and inferences put into one statement. Okay, so if I could take the previous 3 or 4 slides that cover all that stuff and put it in one sentence, that's a thick sentence. There's a lot going on with that sentence that you kind of have to break down because there's so much information embedded into it. Natural selection is differential success in reproduction, meaning some individuals are going to be better at reproducing than others, right? That's what that statement means. And the reason that we have this differential reproductive success is from the interaction between the individuals, and we'll just say, and their environment. And you notice they throw this in here too, which makes it even more kind of thick and chewy. These individuals have different inheritable traits. So if we relate that to the peppered moths, the varied heritable traits would be the color, dark or light. Okay? One of them was better at surviving in a certain environment than another. And as a result, it got to reproduce more. Okay? That is the meat and bones of natural selection. Certain things surviving better than others because of the traits they have that make them work in their environment. Natural selection produces an increase in adaptation over time of organisms to their environment, like camouflage. Okay? And we're going to take some time out here, and we're going to look at some extreme versions of camouflage to show you just how extreme this adaptation over time can become. Because some organisms are so adapted to a very specific environment. If that environment ever changed, they are up a creek without a paddle. Something that wants to eat them be like, why is this brightly colored flower thing walking around in a desolate wasteland? And they eat it. Because it maybe used to be adapted for a bright, flowery environment. And then maybe all those plants died. Okay, so we'll look at some examples of that camouflage, which is always kind of cool. If an environment changes over time, natural selection may result in adaptation to these new conditions. Just like the moss that we just played around with. Industrial Revolution changed things really, really quickly. As a result, the population changed pretty quickly. Okay, certain things got eaten at a higher rate, and then the ones that were left over got to reproduce more. Much of the time, natural selection relies on the environment or factors in the environment. That's one thing you have to understand. Now, these factors in the environment could be biotic or abiotic. What does that? What do those terms mean? What does the word? Okay, look first. What's the word biotic mean? Life, right? So biotic factors are things in the environment that are living. Okay, so part of the environment that these organisms might interact with that are living might be predators, might be trees, might be other plants that they're trying to blend in with. Okay. What about abiotic? Not. Anytime you put that A letter in front of something, or not anytime, but most of the time you put that A letter in front of it, it means not or isn't. Okay. So not living factors. And you'll notice that some of these organisms we're going to see here in a minute, their camouflage, okay, their way of interacting or adapting to the environment is to adapt to a non-living thing like a rock or sand. Okay, so they interact with all parts of the environment in an attempt to stay alive. All that stuff does play into whether or not they survive. So here's a couple of just real brief, basic pictures. I don't know, this one you can see it's obviously it's a walking stick. It's a stick mantis, the praying mantis. It looks like a stick. Can you see the organism at the top? Like if you look on, you'd probably pick out its body parts. It is also a mantis variety, but it's living on a flower, a tropical flower. And I'm just going to go ahead and outline where it's at. So there's a leg. Here's another leg. Here's its butt. Abdomen, here's a leg. His front legs there. Eyeball, leg. That's him right there, or her. We don't know, right? But that is the organism. I mean, that's a very extreme form of camouflage. So if all these flowers died, guess who's up a creek without a paddle? That one, okay? Because it's so brightly colored now in a desolate wasteland type of environment that it's probably going to get picked off and eaten. All right, so these examples of extreme camouflage are really good examples to help us understand what natural selection can do. The fact that certain organisms are highly adapted to their environments, and obviously it changes. You know, you don't always need to have these extreme adaptations, but sometimes you do see them. All right, let's see if we can watch a video here. All right, so folks at home, I'm gonna get off of one of these meets so you can watch this with us. So some of these are pretty crazy. They're almost impossible to see.
Number 25, the bat-faced toad. Taken among the leaves of Amakayaku National Park in Colombia, this bat-faced toad is masterful at blending into its surroundings. Number 24, the common bearing caterpillar. Commonly found in India and Southeast Asia, these caterpillars often blend into the mango plants on which they make their homes, and quite often are a big headache to local farmers. Number 23, the deadleaf mantis. It shouldn't be too hard to see where this species of mantis gets its name. Number 22, the mossy leaf-tailed gecko. Endemic to Madagascar, this gecko can not only change color to match its surroundings, but it also has several dermal flaps that extend outwards to break up its outline. Number 21, the deadleaf butterfly. Found throughout tropical Asia, the deadleaf butterfly resembles a dry leaf with dark veins when its wings are closed. Number 20, the stonefish. The stonefish is not only ridiculously good at concealing itself, but it's also one of the most venomous creatures in the world. Number 19, the fantastic leaf-tailed gecko. Closely related to the mossy leaf-tailed gecko, this little critter also makes its home in Madagascar, and as you can see from the picture, it's fairly obvious where it gets its name from. Number 18, the wolf spider. These agile hunters will camouflage themselves against their surroundings and then wait patiently for their unfortunate victims. Number 17, the ghost mantis. Making its home in Africa and Madagascar, the ghost mantis operates in a very similar manner to the wolf spider, waiting patiently for its prey to stumble across its path. Number 16, Philomemus. More commonly known as a leaf katydid, this photo was taken on Mount Truss in Borneo. Number 15, the great gray owl. In spite of its large size, the great gray owl has no problem concealing itself, especially in the cold northern regions it typically inhabits. Number 14, the pale-throated three-toed sloth. Although sloths aren't typically known for their camouflage, this photo, taken in South America, manages to make the sloth seem like a master of disguise. Number 13, the southern rock agama lizard. Found mostly in South Africa, this species of lizard is known for its ability to blend into the surrounding rocks. Number 12, the leafy sea dragon. Closely related to seahorses, the leafy sea dragon can be found up and down the coast of Australia and is well known for the long leaf-like protrusions it uses for camouflage. Number 11, pygmy seahorse. As a result of its small size and extreme level of camouflage, this species of seahorse wasn't discovered until the coral upon which it resides was closely examined in a laboratory. Number 10, the right-eyed flounder. Because they always lie on the ocean floor on their left side, this species of flounder has both eyes on its right side, hence the name. Number 9, the orchid mantis. Thriving in the humid and warm Indonesian rainforest, this mantis can usually be found on papaya trees and will pretty much eat anything it catches. Number 8, the Egyptian nightjar. Typically flying at night, the nightjar usually lies concealed in the dirt during the day. Number 7, the cuttlefish. Despite the name, this really isn't a fish, it's a mollusk, and a very well-hidden one at that. Besides their insane camouflage skills, they're also considered to be one of the most intelligent invertebrates with a very high brain-to-body mass ratio. Number 6, the leaf katydid. Although we already saw katydid at number 16, there are over 6,400 species, and almost all of them are extremely good at blending into their environment. Number 5, the chameleon. It should go without saying, but this list wouldn't be complete without the most popular camouflager of them all. Number 4, Paradoxophila palmata. Threatened by habitat loss, this unique and difficult to spot frog species is endemic to Madagascar. Number 3, the knobbly crab spider. Lying on the east coast of Australia, this shy spider is very hard to spot unless it's moving. Usually, however, if you do manage to spot one, it will be resting among tree bark. Number 2, the horned rock dweller dragonfly. The species of dragonfly doesn't play any games when it comes to blending in. And number 1, Indonesian mimic octopus. Not only does this species of octopus change its colors to mimic other animals, it actually imitates them as well. In fact, it's been known to copy everything from sea snakes to jellyfish.
All right, so there are a couple of other sites there. I'm not going to pull those up, but it's one of those clickbait things. I put them up there. I fell for it and put it up there. A couple of sites here that you can go to if you want to look at more of those fun camouflage pictures and try to pick them out. One thing we have yet to talk about that I want to at least mention here is something known as artificial selection. And that is the reason we want to talk about artificial selection is because it's a form of natural selection that humans partake in. So artificial selection is a process in which humans consciously select for or against particular features in an organism. So it's done, very much the same way that the environment would select for a specific trait, like the dark bark in an industrialized nation selects for the darkly colored moth in that particular region because the dark moth blends in. With artificial selection, human beings only allow certain organisms of a particular breed or species to reproduce. Since we've domesticated them, since we kind of control them and we make them our own, we can choose whether or not they're going to breed with some other organism of the same breed or maybe even a different breed. And what we can do is we can kind of target specific features of an animal that we want to make sure populate or not propagate through the population in further generations. Okay, so why do I have a picture of a wiener dog up there, a dachshund? How? Any guesses what this dog maybe was originally bred for? Maybe you know a lot about dog breeds. Anybody want to take a guess as to what this dog was bred for? Why it looks like that? We all know what wiener dogs look like. They look like little sausages, right? Why would that thing look like a little sausage? This is the fun part about natural selection. Now this is artificial selections, but they didn't always look like this. Why is it that they kind of have this kind of extreme feature of being kind of long, narrow, low to the ground, short, stubby? Kendall? Yeah, they were for hunting ground animals. Dachshunds were used to hunt like rabbits and ground squirrels and stuff like that. And so these things would go flying into the hole trying to grab the animal. And so it would make sense that a long, narrow dog would work better for hunting burrowing animals, right? They can get in there a little bit deeper and try to catch the thing before it gets away. Not only that, they've got these short, stubby feet, which can kind of anchor so they don't get drug under by the animal. And so that I was actually reading up on them a little bit, so that their owners can pull their hind legs and pull them back out if their butt is sticking out of the hole. So they're perfectly adapted for that particular task, right? And so their breeders would have tried to pick the longest, skinniest dogs with the shortest, stubbiest legs and only breed those because they wanted the further generations to have extreme versions of those traits. That's what artificial selection is. Now, we see it in more than just dachshunds, but that's kind of an extreme example. These are all different breeds of hunting dogs, and different dogs have different things, different traits that the owner wants to try and breed into them. Okay, for instance, the bloodhound, wherever he's at, I know he should be up here. If he's not, he should be. This is a hound, though, right here. A lot of those hound dogs are great at smelling things, good at tracking. Okay, some of these are great at, they just have this innate knack of retrieving things and wanting to please their owners, and so they continuously breed that particular trait into the animal. Some of these animals, I've actually seen rat terriers do what they're designed to do, to like kill rats. It's the craziest thing. I saw it on like Facebook or something. I think it was like a video from like Ireland, and they had like dug up this trench and there was dozens of rats, and these rat terriers just come in and start ripping them apart. I mean, little rat terriers are cute little dogs, jump around, go crazy, and they're fun. These things were killing rats. Like they'd see one, kill it, see it, kill it, go get it. And so something about that breed of dog made them recognize rats and be ferocious towards them. I don't know what it was, but something in them allowed them to be really, really good at their, oh, there's a bloodhound front and center. But yeah, each of these dogs at some point had a trait that was good for something the person was hunting, and they continued to breed it into them. It's as if natural selection was being controlled by humans, is effectively what it was. Okay? All right. Yeah, we can get into this. There is a video here that's about 10 minutes. I'm not going to show it today. We'll see if we can watch it maybe tomorrow if we have time. Maybe just kick off class tomorrow with a 10-minute video and then jump into the stations. But section 3 here gets into how Darwin's theory can explain all these different observations that we actually see in nature now. Okay. And so we'll talk about a few examples, and then we'll talk about some evidence that helps support some of these observations. Okay. So it says Darwin's theory of evolution continues to be tested by how effectively it can account for additional observations and experimental outcomes. And we'll kind of go into these experiments or examples, talk briefly about each one, and then we'll kind of call it a day. Okay. So the first one we're going to go through is research into these little guppy fish. Okay. Researchers have observed natural selection leading to adaptive evolution in guppy populations. This example is in your book. If you want a deeper explanation as to what this experiment entails and what it's telling you about natural selection, you can go kind of read it a little bit more in depth. I'm going to just basically give you an overview because there's, you need to know an example. You don't need to know the details of this experiment. But what they effectively did was they took these little guppies, okay, and they studied the age and size at which they reached sexual maturity. Okay. Now these different guppy populations lived in different under different selective pressures. Okay. Selective pressures are things like predators or just the environment. Maybe it's a change in climate. Those would be selective pressures. Okay. Things that could possibly kill them or allow for some to be killed and some to be left alive. That's kind of what a selective pressure is. But we've got two different populations of guppies. One of the populations of guppies lives with killfish, which is their predator. Okay, and the other population lives with pike cichlids, which is their predator. Okay, now in this pool up at the top, this pool right here, the little guppies would reach sexual maturity at a different age than those in this pool here, okay? A different age and size. And the reason for that, researchers thought, was because of the type of animal that preyed on them, all right? And so what they wanted to do is see, was it the animal that preyed on them? And what would happen if they switched, okay? So what they did is they took these guppies right down here, which are used to being preyed on by pike cichlids. It doesn't matter what they are, but we know that these guppies here are used to being preyed on by this animal here. And so what they did is they took these guppies and they put them in this pool. And instead of being preyed on by pike cichlids in this pool, they're being preyed on by killfish. So they just wanted to see, researchers wanted to see what would happen if they switched the predators, to see what happened. And it turns out that something did happen. They noticed that there was a distinct change in the guppies that they took out of this pool down here once they were left with a brand new predator. Okay? It turns out that the age at which they had sexual maturity did in fact change. Okay? And so the data that you see in the next slide kind of indicates that. And all I really wanted you to get from this is that what happened is that the selective pressure changed, okay, for that particular fish. It was no longer the pike cichlid fish that was eating them. It was this other predator. And so as a result, they changed based on the predator that was now feeding on their population. Kind of a crazy thing. And so if you want to go in for more detail, feel free. I'm not going to really get into this. That's part of what you should be doing, is going in and interpreting this stuff. And if you try it and you want some more interpretation, you can come ask, okay? Second example we've got here is the evolution of drug resistance in HIV strains. And we see this with all sorts of microorganisms. See it with viruses, obviously. We see it with bacteria. Okay, I mean, we're seeing it now in our populations. We're seeing it with the coronavirus right now. These different resistant strains of it, mildly resistant to some of the antibiotics that we have, not the vaccines that we have, and also to our immune systems. They're kind of skirting the immune system. But what we see here with the evolution of drug-resistant HIV is something we've talked about before. With some of the drugs that are out there with things like HIV or antibiotics or anything like that, you have this situation where the drug might kill 99.9% of the thing it's meant to kill. And it's one of the things you see, the disinfectants. It says kills 99.9% of germs and viruses, right? That other 0.1% is the one you got to watch out for, because those are still alive, and there's a reason they're still alive, because something in their DNA, something in their structure allowed them to escape the drugs that were given, right? And so if they're allowed to escape, then they're allowed to reproduce at a higher rate, because they're the only ones that are left. And all of a sudden we get now a giant population of drug-resistant bacteria or drug-resistant virus, whatever it is. And they call these things superbugs. And they're very hard to kill. Some of them can't be killed by the normal antibiotics that we actually have. So we have to watch out for those type of things. And so we see that with HIV resistance, HIV-resistant drugs, okay? The third example, which I'm going to show you starting tomorrow, is called the rock mouse. Okay, the rock mouse, and it's a 10-minute spiel. They kind of walk you through natural selection. They show you. It's a great little video. So we'll pick that up there tomorrow with the very first part of class, and then we'll do something with the evidence of evolution, which I think is the next set of slides there. Yeah. So we are done for the day, folks at home. You guys can take off, and see you back in the morning with some instructions for class tomorrow.